what we're going to do, having established, I think, in the previous presentation about the stonemasons, Freemasons, how they become melded or integrated together. What I want to do now is to show you how that happened in terms of the ritual. It's okay to look at the records and see that the Earl of Findlater became a member of such and such a lodge, or the Lord such and such became a member of that lodge. That just tells us that people joined. It's what they were doing in these lodges that, to me, is the most important thing. Because when you read the minutes, it says things like the oldest minutes. It said, the lodge was opened, Bob Cooper was made an entered apprentice, and the lodge was closed. Now it doesn't tell, and it usually says, and he paid his shilling. They always record the money, and he paid his shilling. And so it tells us a little bit about the people, and if the person was important, they maybe mention the fact that he's a lord or whatever. But it doesn't tell us what they were doing to admit these people into the lodge. Now, the reason why we don't know that is because there is no ritual, there is no written ritual in existence from the beginning of these records in 1599. So we have to explain what happened between 1599 and the appearance of the first ritual, which is almost 100 years later. And this is, in my opinion, an extremely interesting and important story. Purely by accident, this is the Scottish National Archive in Edinburgh, oddly enough, designed and built by a Freemason architect by the name of Robert Adam. In this building, there was discovered a handwritten ritual, known as, in this case, the Airlie ritual. And we're going to discuss the Airlie ritual. And you will find that in the papers that you have, there is a copy of the ritual. What has happened in terms of Masonic historiography is when English Masonic historians looked at these old Scottish records, and these were very eminent historians, Knoop, Jones and Hamer, they only had an English dictionary to translate Scottish documents. Now, the belief was, until very recently, that Scots was just a form, and a bad form or a corrupt form of English. So they used, they believed this, so, and they were taught this in school, so, unfortunately. And so the translation of the old minute books and the old rituals and all sorts of other associated documents that were translated by people like Knoop, Jones and Hamer were translated using the Oxford English Dictionary, which of course is supposed to be one of the best dictionaries of the English language available. The problem with that, of course, is that people don't realize that Scots was a separate language. Now, it's not even a dialect of English, it was a separate language altogether. It was not until 1960 when the Scottish National Dictionary got to the letter, some particular parts of the alphabet, that we began to realize that these Masonic historians had made some very serious mistakes in translation of words. So, here we have the differences between the Scottish and English languages, and you'll see England on the right essentially has two parts to it, an eastern part and a western part. And then there's a little bit of confusion near the Scottish border. No, not surprising. However, when you look at Scotland, you can see these little areas here are all different languages depending on where you are in Scotland. The white part, which isn't coloured at all, this white part here, this was almost entirely Gaelic. And oddly enough, there were no lodges, or early lodges, in this Gaelic-speaking part of Scotland. So, when you find documents that come from places like Aberdeen, up here, or Melrose down here, you can see that the language, there are 2 or 3 different languages in between those places. So translating something using a dictionary based on the language of another country means almost inevitably that mistakes are made. And it's those mistakes that unfortunately have caused some problems with the modern ritual, more especially in English-speaking countries who did not understand what some of the Scottish words meant in the ritual. So we're going to discuss this. We're not going to discuss any secrets or anything. We're just going to discuss the ritual as such. But the copy that you have is the most recently discovered one. Now, there are 3. And for those of you who know a little bit about the scientific method of history, one thing can be just an aberration, an oddity. 2 things can be sheer coincidence, but when you find 3 things that are the same, then you have something very, very important and very weighty, and something with great meaning. And so when we discovered the Airlie manuscript, which was just a few years ago, that was the 3rd ritual that is identical to the previous 2. So you've got the latest discovered ritual. It's actually the 2nd oldest. The oldest is the Edinburgh Register House manuscript. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that. Tell you about the 3 rituals first. The 3 rituals are the Edinburgh Register House manuscript, which is dated 1696. The next one, which you have a copy of, is the Airlie manuscript, which is dated 1705. And the 3rd one is the Chetwood Crawley manuscript, which is dated about 1710. So the important thing again here to remember is that these 3 Scottish rituals, and I'll show you why we know they're Scottish, these 3 Scottish rituals all predate the existence of a Grand Lodge. So we previously saw the fact that we have a nationwide pattern or a nationwide network of lodges before the existence of Grand Lodge. Now we have at least 3 rituals which are identical that are also before the existence of any Grand Lodge, and they are also Scottish. So we begin to see a picture building up of something going on all over the country, apart from the Gaelic part, but something that is going on all over Scotland, mainly in the towns and the cities. So, where did these rituals actually come from? Well, this is what Scotland was supposed to look like way back in 1697, when the first ritual was written. But this is a much clearer picture to show you where the places are in Scotland. Aberdeen, we've discussed, where one of the oldest minute books comes from, but the Airlie manuscript comes from this place called Dundee. It's a city between Edinburgh and Aberdeen. And it's important because it's the only one of the 3 that we know was owned by a family, and it was owned by the Earls of Airlie, hence the name, the Airlie manuscript. So this was, again, a handwritten copy of the ritual that was used by the stonemasons' lodges, but it was in the library of an aristocrat, a Scottish aristocrat, who was very, how would we say, very interested in esoteric matters. His library were full of Hermetic, Rosicrucian, all sorts of esoteric type stuff. And I just want to show you very precisely, if I can, this is a close-up map. Here's Dundee here, and his, you see, and Aberdeen is up here. So the connection between Aberdeen and Dundee by sea was a very common way of travelling backwards and forwards. Now, when we know, as we saw from the previous presentation, the Earl of Findlater, he has land around Aberdeen, but he is related to the Airlies who live just outside Dundee. I don't think they're quite on the map for some reason. The town. No, I can't see it. Anyway, they had property, land just outside Dundee, and the earliest records of the Lodge of Dundee show the Earls of Airlie were masters of this lodge in Dundee. Now, to just make things a little bit more complicated, the Earl of Findlater married the daughter of the Earl of Eglinton, where he was master of the Lodge of Kilwinning. And Kilwinning is down here, but there's an enlargement of it, if I can see it on the map. Damn it. It's a bit messy, but Kilwinning is, there's Prestwick. It's in here somewhere. Honest. Anyway, Kilwinning is just inland from here. So what we have is we have rituals. The one ritual from Dundee, owned by the Earl of Airlie, but connected to family connection to the Earl of Findlater in Aberdeen, who is married and therefore has a family connection to the lodge in Kilwinning. So here you have north, south, and west of Scotland, a connection in the aristocracy owning Masonic ritual. They actually own the ritual of this period. And so it seems to me that the network is not just a network of lodges, but it's a network of members of the aristocracy who are interested in esoteric elements of the ritual. Otherwise, why have them? Why keep them? They could only be for personal use. They are handwritten. They are obviously been used many times. They are folded. Some have holes where the folds have worn the paper away. So they were in use on a regular basis. Now, back to the Aberdeen Mark book, and this again is just to prove, I think, yes, it was simply to, again, show you the Earl of Findlater, who was cousin to the Earl of Airlie. And, and just to make the point about the coat of arms, and this is the Findlater coat of arms from Aberdeen, at the time, you will see that what is being held is known as a plum erect. Okay, so he's used a Masonic plum rule as part of his coat of arms, and indeed the family coat of arms still uses this in the modern version of the coat of arms. So when he adopted this coat of arms in the late part of the 17th century, this is recorded in what they call the Court of the Lord Lion. He asked for this to be put in to his coat of arms when he was a member of the lodge in Aberdeen. So this is what it looks like. This is the actual copy, the handwritten copy of the Airlie manuscript. And this one, fortunately, doesn't show too much in the way of wear and tear, but you can see that it consists of a list of questions, and then there are like a list of instructions. And if we have time at the end, I think we might discuss some of the questions because they are very interesting. And this is, again, just to prove finally the actual date. And it's signed Mason 1705. So the final proof, I mean, whoever wrote this, it was probably the Earl of Airlie's secretary probably copied this. Just to confirm that he'd done that, he actually puts the date on the end of the document. Now, what I want to do before we actually go into maybe some of the questions, this is important in terms of understanding why the mistranslation of Scottish documents by English authors causes a problem. There is a question, and I think that's okay. We're all first-degree Masons, yeah, so that's all right. Question 3, and it's this word here that I want to emphasize. Heal, H-E-I-L, or there's various different spellings of it. Knoop, Jones, and Hamer, when they were translating it using the Oxford English Dictionary, the only word they could find that was close was heelen, H-E-L-E-N, and that was an Old English word for healing in small plants into the ground before they grew. And of course that kind of made sense because you were hiding the roots of the little plant before it grew. When the Scottish National Dictionary was published for the letter H, heal, it says heal equals secret. And so that's all that word means, is to keep secret. Tell me the first point, I'll tell you the second. The first is to keep secret. And then in order to make sure, because the word heal being Scottish, for anyone who is not familiar with the Scottish language, the author, these are educated aristocrats, remember, he's added the word conceal to make sure there's no doubt that the word heal means to conceal, to keep secret. And so when we find words like this, this begins to prove to us that this is very much definitely a Scottish document. I'm going to skip this one because we'll come to that question when we talk about the ritual itself. Kitchen and hall, and very quickly, this part, this question, which is 14, it simply says, which is the key of the, let me get it right, question 15, where lies the key of your lodge? And it's this part here that's caused all the confusion. It says at the very bottom, I see that you have been in the kitchen, but I know not if you've been in the hall. And then the answer is, I have been in the hall as well as the kitchen. Now, in Scotland, those of you who have been to Scotland, you'll have seen the small houses that ordinary people live in. These are called butt and bens. I don't know, yeah, go back. Butt and bens means kitchen and hall in Scots. So they're asking, I know that you have been in the entered apprentice hall, but I don't know if you've been in the fellow craft hall. So he's saying, I know you have the first degree, but I don't know if you have the second degree. And that is because of a mistranslation of what a kitchen and a hall is in Scots. It's a butt and a ben, okay? So, and then this was, and to me, this is one of the most important parts of the ritual, because this puts on a par Freemasonry in a way that no other organization does. It just says, you know, I am sworn by God and St. John and the square and compasses and the common judge to mend my master's service at the Honourable Lodge. So not only has he taken, as an entered apprentice, not only has he taken an oath by God and by St. John, so by the great architect of the universe, by St. John, and in Scotland that's St. John the Evangelist, but he's also sworn by the square and compasses. So in other words, the three are of central importance to the taking of an oath of an entered apprentice. God, St. John, and the square and compasses. Now I may have to skip this very quickly. Yeah, okay. Sometimes I'm worried that I've maybe put too much information into some of these slides, but I've got away with it this time. This part relates to the second degree, but it doesn't give away any secrets. What happens here is that you'll have seen before, he swore his oath by God and St. John and the square and compasses. This, relating to the next degree, says he then comes in again, having taken his second degree, and he makes the sign and says the words, but leaving out the common judge. So he's still sworn by God, St. John, and the square and compasses, but the common judge is no longer needed. So what is the common judge? Well, of course, as an entered apprentice, you're not a Freemason, and you can be judged by the common people. When you have become a Freemason, you're no longer judged by the common people, you're judged by your fellow Freemasons. And that's why they take out the common judge. They take out the fact that you are no longer to be judged by the profane, the non-Masons. By this time, you're being judged by your fellow Freemasons and fellow Freemasons only. So, to conclude, the three documents, the three oldest documents, all pre-Grand Lodge, are undoubtedly Scottish, and the fact that they are all virtually identical, I think we can safely say that now that we've seen the pattern of lodges across Scotland, the fact that the aristocracy are all associated with some of the most important lodges across Scotland, and that they are sharing the ritual between themselves, that we have a national system of stonemasons' lodges with some aristocratic and professional people who are members. And this is why I think they joined the lodge, because they were curious to know what the esoteric information was within the lodge. So that was the conclusion. We're going to go on a bit, but I think we have time. We have a little time. Can I pause that? No, stay there. One more. Okay, right. Do you think we have time to have a look at the ritual? Okay. So I need a copy. I don't have one. It's stupid. But, here. That's excellent. I think, if you don't mind, we can't go through the whole ritual. It's too big. It's, although there are only 4 pages, there is a huge amount of information in it. Sometime we may have to pause, because when we are recording, I'll simply stop and we'll put a new tape in, but we're okay for now. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but what I can tell you from this document, and I would urge you to take it away and study it, because there are some things in here that we still don't quite understand. It consists of 2 parts, questions and then a description of a ceremony, which is in effect the first degree. There is a very small part that doesn't describe the second degree, but it mentions it. So that, again, we're not giving away any secrets. And so there is an argument that what happened is that they give the entered apprentice ceremony in a very full way. They give the fellow of craft in a very tiny way, and they don't mention the third degree at all. So whether it existed or not, we don't know for sure. However, It's the esoteric information that is contained within the ritual that I think is interesting, and that's what I want to discuss now. Now, some of this is very straightforward initially. So, question first, as it says, are you a Mason? Answer, are you a Mason or not? Answer yes. Well, this is typically Scottish, because if the answer was no, well, we can forget about the other 14 questions, can't we? Yeah, right? No, but the answer is yes, you say you are a Mason. Question 2, how shall I know it? You shall answer in a time and place convenient. You shall know it. And then there is a remark. The aforesaid answer is only to be made when there is company present who are not Masons. I'm translating slightly. But if there is no such company nearby, you should answer by signs, tokens, and other points of the entry. So in other words, there's two possible answers to this question. How shall I know if you are a Freemason or not? Well, it depends on whether or not there are non-Freemasons present. If there are people who are not Freemasons present, you answer in a time and place convenient. We'll discuss that. If you know that only Freemasons are present, then you answer by giving the signs, tokens, and points of your entry. And we all know what the signs, tokens, and words mean, even today. And so you can see, even from the very second question, from 1696, we can recognize this in modern ritual. Even today, they're making the same kind of comment. Question 3, what is the first point? Answer, you tell me the first point and I'll tell you the second. Now, I don't know how it works here, but whoever answers the question is always told, no, you ask the question, you must return it to me first. You must reverse it. And that's exactly what has happened here. Question 4, where were you entered? Answer, the Honourable Lodge. And we think this is a trick question because only a Freemason would know to say that you were entered in an honourable lodge. It's a curious form of words. Question 5, what makes a true and perfect lodge? The answer is 7 masters and 5 entered apprentices, a day's journey from a borough's town without bark of a dog or crow of a cock. So in other words, what is necessary in order to form a perfect lodge, a true lodge? And the answer is 5 masters and 5 entered apprentices, 12 Masons, in other words. And then, interestingly enough, they say a day's journey from a borough, from a town where you cannot hear the bark of a dog or the crow of a cock. So they're implying that you've got to travel so far away that it's not possible for any human being to hear what you're doing as a Freemason. That might be allegorical. It might be saying you have to be very careful and very quiet as to what you do, because I can't imagine 12 people jumping on horses and riding for a day to initiate someone. But who knows? I mean, this is 300 years ago. So, question 6, does no less make a true and perfect lodge? Answer, yes, 5 masters and 3 entered apprentices. So what's happening here is they're saying, do we really have to have 7 masters and 5 entered apprentices? That's an awful lot of people to get together just to have a lodge. And the answer is, well, if you really have to have a lodge, the minimum that you need is 5 masters and 3 entered apprentices. So it's reduced by a third to 8. So you can get away with opening a lodge with 8 people, 8 Masons. And then question 7, and this is the same question in all 3 of these rituals. What is the name of your lodge? Answer, Kilwinning. And as we've seen, the Kilwinning has a connection both with Dundee and Aberdeen. But the fact that it appears in rituals that are found in different parts of Scotland suggests that Kilwinning was the most well-known lodge, certainly at this time. And the first of these documents is known as the Edinburgh Register House manuscript. It was discovered in Edinburgh, but the ritual talks about the lodge of Kilwinning. And of course, you know, there is a big argument in Scotland as to which is the oldest lodge. Is it Edinburgh or is it Kilwinning? Well, I just find it very interesting that the oldest ritual is found in Edinburgh, but it mentions Kilwinning. Interesting, interesting. Question 8, and I think here we begin to get into the very esoteric elements. We must realize that the stonemasons of this time are illiterate or semi-literate, but they are not stupid. They understand what they're doing, and if they can't read and write, they get someone else to do it for them. So as I say, don't confuse illiteracy with stupidity. Some people unfortunately do that. But I think, as I say, we get to a very interesting esoteric and wordplay here. Question 8, how stands your lodge? And the answer is east and west as the temple of Jerusalem. So in other words, what is the orientation of your lodge? What is the position of your lodge? And the answer is given east and west as the temple, as King Solomon's temple is in Jerusalem. Then question 9, where was the first lodge? Answer, in the porch of Solomon's temple. So, right in the middle of these test questions, and these are questions to test whether you're a Freemason or not, remember, right in the middle of these test questions, central are 2 references to King Solomon's temple. So King Solomon's temple, even at this very, very early stage, is of paramount importance to Masonic ritual. Now, the other thing about this is, where was the first lodge? Answer, in the porch of King Solomon's temple. Now, the lodge did not meet in the temple, it met in the porch of the temple. That is, in the entryway. That is, between the pillars. As you know, King Solomon's temple had 2 freestanding pillars, and that's the porch. And so the first lodge was not in the sacred space, and that's why it is not religious. The stonemasons who built King Solomon's temple held the first lodge in the entrance, that is, in the public part of the temple, not in the sacred or religious part, which was beyond the porch. And this is very, very important when you're arguing with anyone who says that Freemasonry is religious and uses King Solomon's temple in any kind of religious or sacred way. It does not. It makes it clear here that we meet in the porch of King Solomon's temple. Unfortunately, us human beings have a tendency to be lazy. And what we've done is, instead of saying, this is a lovely porch of the temple, we say, this is a lovely temple. But it's supposed to be the porch of King Solomon's temple. So, and then, as I was saying to someone the other night, this question is very interesting because it says, question 10, are there any lights in your lodge? Answer, yes, 3. The northeast, the southwest, and the eastern passage. Right? So they are actual geographic locations, the 3 great lights, typically represented by 3 candles in lots of lodges. But, as well as being places, they also actually denote people. The master mason, the warden, and the fellow of craft. So the 3 great lights were not actual physical lights, they were 3 officers of the lodge. And then we do get into very deep and perhaps somewhat difficult, but fascinating questions nonetheless. Question 11, are there any blank in your lodge? The blank we know from the other 2 rituals is the word jewels. Are there any jewels in your lodge? And the answer is, they're perpendicular and a square pavement and a brobed ornal. Now that requires some explanation because it's
Scots, and it's slightly corrupt. So, are there any jewels in the lodge? Yes, there are. There are 3. A that means perpendicular, and an ashlar is an ashlar, or a perfectly smooth, upright stone. And a brobed ornal is a corruption of a broached thurnal, which was the working tool that was made to take all the worst bumps and lumps off a stone before it was made completely smooth. So, where are are there jewels in your lodge? And they're saying perpendicular, a square pavement, okay, and a brobed ornal. Right. Question 12. Where will I find the key of your lodge? And here we now get into very deep waters. Where will I find the key of your lodge? The question is, there is a key that opens the lodge, the esoteric knowledge of the lodge. A key opens the lodge. And they want, the person asking the question wants to know where the key is. And of course the answer that is given here, yes, there is a key. It's 3.5 foot, a meter, slightly more than a meter, from the lodge door, under a perpendicular and a green divot. So the key to the lodge is 1 meter from the door of the lodge, under a perpendicular stone, under a green divot, which of course is grass, green grass. So what does that mean? It means the key to the lodge is in the grave. You take the key to open the secrets of the lodge to the grave with you. So the secrets exist, or the key to get the secrets exist, but you only find it in a Freemason's grave. You will not find it anywhere else. Question 13. What mean you by a perpendicular and a green divot? I mean not only under a perpendicular and a green divot, that is an upright stone and grass, but under the lap of my liver, where all the secrets of my heart lie. Now this is a very curious reference, and it is almost certainly due to the Hermetic belief that the 3 main organs of the body were the brain, the heart, and the liver was the organ that was responsible for the emotions and for retaining information and all that kind of stuff. It's a bit complicated, but it is mentioned and discussed in Cracking the Freemasons Code. But I think that this one question, if nothing else, tells me that the ritual is heavily influenced by Hermeticism and the way Hermetic systems of thought were applied to lodges. And remember, there is so much missing out of this. They are giving us the bare minimum, so we have to guess. Question 14, which is the key of your lodge? And you'll see, again, the emphasis on this key. Where is the key? The demand for the key. Because only the key can open something that otherwise you could not get access to. Without a key, you cannot get the money. You cannot get the documents. You need a key. And so, again, they're asking, which is the key of your lodge? And the ultimate, or the penultimate answer here is a wheel-hung tongue. And you can't get a more Scottish phrase than that. We still use it today. A wheel-hung tongue means someone that can keep his mouth shut. Simple as that. Which is the key of your lodge? And he's telling you, essentially the answer is, keep your mouth shut. That's an end to it. But there is one last question. And again, where lies the key? Again, this demand to know where the key is. And the answer this time is in a bone box. Now, we've seen from the previous question, 13,
that we think are 12 and 13, it looks like it's the grave. Well, this is one of the questions that we're not quite sure of, and we don't know quite what the interpretation is. But given the fact that they're talking about a tongue in the previous question, it's not impossible that the bone box is the skull. But of course, a coffin is also a box for bones. So we can see that they are playing with words here, and they are not telling you clearly what the answer to these questions are. They are giving you clues for you to try and work out what the real esoteric knowledge within this ritual actually is. So what I've said is that I think that's enough. That tells you these are the questions that are used in that 300 years ago to establish whether or not you were a Freemason. And you can see there is clearly a lot of it starts very simply, but it gets very, very, very quickly, becomes very complicated. And unless you were a Freemason, you would never guess some of the answers to these questions. You simply wouldn't know. So a very good way of finding out whether you're genuinely initiated into a Masonic lodge or not. When you read this, and you take this home and you read this, what you will notice is it tells you nothing at all about how the lodge functioned. It doesn't tell you about any of the furniture. It doesn't tell you about how anybody walked around the lodge, or where they stood, or when they said anything. But it does give you a little bit of information about the obligation that we take as an entered apprentice, which is equally interesting. So, a souvenir for you to take home. I hope you found that interesting. Thanks very much.